The blood on her dress had already dried to a rust-brown stain when Willow Garrett stumbled into the livery stable in Fort Smith, Arkansas, her breath coming in ragged gasps that tore through her chest like knives. She pressed herself into the shadowed corner behind a stack of hay bales, her trembling hands pulling at her torn sleeve in a futile attempt to cover the bruises that circled her wrists like dark bracelets. And she listened to the sound of boots on the dirt street outside, heavy and purposeful, getting closer with each second that passed. The year was 1873, and Fort Smith sat on the edge of civilization, a dusty collection of weathered buildings that served as the last outpost before the untamed territories beyond, where the law grew thin and dangerous men made their own rules. Willow had learned that lesson the hard way over the past 6 months, ever since Marcus Dalton had convinced her father to let him court her, ever since she had seen behind the charming smile to the monster that lived beneath. She heard Marcus calling her name in the street, his voice carrying that deceptive sweetness he used when other people were watching. Her whole body shook with the effort of staying silent, of not crying out, of not giving away her hiding place in this stable that smelled of horses and leather and hay. The late afternoon sun slanted through the gaps in the wooden walls, painting stripes of gold across the dirt floor, and she pulled herself tighter into her corner, making herself as small as possible. The stable door creaked open, and Willow's heart stopped. But the footsteps that entered were different from Marcus's heavy tread, lighter and more measured, accompanied by the soft jingle of spurs. She held her breath as a tall figure moved into her line of sight, leading a magnificent black horse with white stockings. The man was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a face that spoke of long days under the sun. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that sat easy on his hips, the way a man wore it when he knew how to use what it held. He was turning toward the horse when he froze, his gray eyes locking onto the corner where Willow hid. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke, his voice low and careful, the kind of voice you used with a spooked animal. "You hurt." Willow opened her mouth to answer, but the words caught in her throat as Marcus's voice rang out from somewhere close by. "Willow, I know you are around here somewhere. Come out now, and I promise I will go easy on you this time." The cowboy's expression changed, something hardening in his eyes. He glanced toward the door, then back at Willow, and she saw the moment he made his decision. He moved quickly and quietly, stepping between her hiding place and the entrance, positioning himself so that anyone entering would have to go through him first. The stable door slammed open, and Marcus Dalton filled the doorway, his bulk blocking out the afternoon light. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders and chest, with hands that Willow knew could break bones when he closed them into fists. His face was flushed with anger and exertion, his pale eyes scanning the stable's interior with the intensity of a predator searching for prey. "You seen a woman come through here?" Marcus demanded, his gaze fixing on the cowboy. "Blonde hair, blue dress. She is mine, and she ran off." The cowboy stood perfectly still, his hands relaxed at his sides, but Willow could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he had positioned himself on the balls of his feet. "Stables closed for private business," he said evenly. "You will have to look elsewhere." Marcus took a step inside, his boots heavy on the dirt floor. "I asked you a question, boy. Have you seen her or not? And I told you the stables closed." The cowboy's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "You need to move along." For a moment, Willow thought Marcus would back down. He was a bully, but he was also a coward at heart, the kind of man who only picked fights he knew he could win. But then his gaze swept past the cowboy and landed on the corner where she hid, and his face split into a cruel smile. "There you are," he said, starting forward. "Come here, Willow. Now." The cowboy shifted, not much, just enough to block Marcus's path more completely. "She's with me," he said, and those 3 words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus's face darkened to an ugly red. "The hell she is. That's my woman you are talking about, and I will thank you to step aside before I make you your woman." The cowboy's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but Willow heard the anger underneath it. "Funny thing about that. See, I have been standing here long enough to see she is terrified of you, and that blood on her dress did not get there by accident. So I am going to say this one more time. She's with me, and you are going to turn around and walk out of this stable before we have a problem." Marcus's hand dropped to his gun belt, and Willow's heart lurched into her throat. But the cowboy did not flinch, did not move, just stood there with that same easy stillness, his gray eyes locked on Marcus's face. "You really want to do this?" the cowboy asked softly. "You really want to draw on me? Because I will tell you right now, you will lose. And then the marshal is going to ask questions about why you were so desperate to get to a woman who is clearly running from you." The mention of the marshal made Marcus hesitate. Fort Smith had a reputation for hard justice, and Judge Isaac Parker, who presided over the federal court there, had sent more than a few men to the gallows. Marcus's hand moved away from his gun, but the rage in his eyes did not diminish. "This is not over," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You hear me? This is not over. She belongs to me." "Get out," the cowboy said, and this time there was no mistaking the command in his voice. Marcus stood there for another long moment, his jaw working, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Then he turned and stalked out of the stable, slamming the door behind him so hard that the whole building shook. The cowboy did not move until the sound of Marcus's footsteps had faded completely. Then he turned to Willow, and his expression softened. "You can come out now," he said gently. "He's gone." Willow tried to stand, but her legs would not hold her. She had been running on fear and adrenaline for so long that now, in this moment of unexpected safety, her body simply gave out. She sagged against the hay bales, and then the cowboy was there, kneeling beside her, his hands careful as he helped her sit up properly. "Easy," he murmured. "You are safe now, I promise." Willow looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time, and saw only concern in those gray eyes. Not the false concern that Marcus had shown in the beginning, before she had seen his true nature, but genuine worry for a stranger he had never met before. "Why did you help me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming and crying and running. "You do not even know me." The cowboy settled back on his heels, giving her space. "Did not need to know you to see you needed help," he said simply. "Besides, I never did like men who think they can own another person like property. Name's Zachary Jameson, by the way. Most folks call me Zach, Willow Garrett." She managed a weak smile. "Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not been here." Zach's expression darkened briefly. "I've got a pretty good idea, and none of it is pleasant. How long has he been hurting you?" The question, asked so directly, caught Willow off guard. She looked down at her hands, at the bruises on her wrists, at the dried blood on her dress that had come from a split lip Marcus had given her that morning when she had dared to tell him she did not want to marry him. 6 months, she said quietly. Maybe longer. It started small, a grip too tight. Words that cut, then it got worse. "What about your family? Can they help?" Willow shook her head, fighting back tears. "My father thinks the sun rises and sets with Marcus Dalton. Marcus is wealthy, respectable. My father says I should be grateful for his attention. And my mother." She trailed off, unable to finish that sentence. Her mother had looked at the bruises and told Willow that marriage required sacrifices, that she needed to try harder to please her husband-to-be. Zach was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. "You are not going back to him," he said finally. "I will make sure of that." "You cannot just decide that," Willow said, but there was hope in her voice, desperate and fragile. "Marcus is connected. He has friends, money. And my father already signed the betrothal agreement. In 2 weeks, I am supposed to marry him." "Not if you are not here to marry." Zach stood up, offering her his hand. "Can you ride?" Willow stared at his outstretched hand. "You are asking me to run away with you. You do not even know me." "No," Zach said. "I am asking if you would rather take your chances on the trail with a stranger or stay here and marry a man who hits you. The choice is yours, Miss Garrett. I will not force you either way. But if you want out, I can offer you that. I am heading west to Texas, to my family's ranch near the Red River. You could come with me, at least until we are far enough from Fort Smith that he cannot find you. After that, well, we can figure that out when we get there." It was madness. It was absolutely madness to even consider going off into the wilderness with a man she had just met, no matter how kind he seemed. But as Willow sat there in the stable, still tasting blood in her mouth, still feeling the phantom grip of Marcus's hands on her throat from that morning, she realized that staying was madness too. Staying meant becoming Marcus's wife, meant years of bruises and broken bones and terror, meant losing herself piece by piece until there was nothing left of the girl she had been. She reached up and took Zach's hand. "I can ride," she said. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, warm and genuine. "Good. Then let us get you cleaned up and out of that dress. Marcus knows what you are wearing, and if we are going to slip out of Fort Smith without him noticing, we need you looking like something other than a runaway bride." Over the next hour, Zach proved himself remarkably resourceful. He disappeared from the stable and returned with a bundle of clothes, men's trail clothes that he said belonged to his younger brother back home. "Jesse is about your size," he explained, helping Willow to her feet. "These should fit well enough. There is a room in the back where the stable owner lets me stay sometimes. You can change there." The room was small and simple, just 4 walls and a cot, but it had a basin of water and a cloth, and Willow used them to wash the blood from her face and hands. The dress came off with some difficulty, the fabric catching on the bruises that covered her ribs and back. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror that hung on the wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her blue eyes, once bright with dreams and hope, looked haunted. Her blonde hair hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost, she thought, like something already dead, but she was not dead. She was alive and she was getting out. The men's clothes felt strange at first, the trousers rough against her legs, the shirt hanging loose on her frame. But as Willow tucked the shirt into the pants and cinched the belt tight, she felt something shift inside her. She felt stronger somehow, less like prey. She braided her hair quickly and tucked it up under the hat Zach had included in the bundle, then looked at herself again. She would not pass for a man on close inspection, but from a distance, in the fading light, she might just be another cowboy heading out of town. When she emerged from the back room, Zach was saddling 2 horses, his black stallion and a smaller bay mare with gentle eyes. He looked up as Willow approached, and something in his expression made her blush. "You clean up well," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, you look like you will pass for a ranch hand. That's good. That will help." "Thank you," Willow said, reaching out to stroke the mare's soft nose. "For everything. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You saved my life today." Zach secured the last buckle on the saddle and turned to face her fully. "Then let us make sure we keep you alive," he said. "We will head out the back way, through the river crossing. It will add some time to the journey, but it will keep us off the main road. With any luck, Marcus will be watching the western route out of town, and we will be long gone before he realizes we went south first. They led the horses out through the back of the stable as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. Fort Smith was settling in for the evening, smoke rising from chimneys, lamps being lit in windows. Somewhere in that collection of buildings was Marcus, probably still searching for her, still believing that she was his to command. But with each step Willow took away from the town, leading the mare through the lengthening shadows, she felt the weight on her chest lighten just a little. They mounted up once they reached the tree line, Zach checking the trail ahead before gesturing for Willow to follow. The mare moved easily beneath her, responding to the lightest touch on the reins, and Willow felt a surge of gratitude for Zach's thoughtfulness in choosing such a gentle horse. They rode in silence as the darkness deepened around them, following a narrow trail that wound through the trees and down toward the Arkansas River. The crossing was shallow this time of year, the water barely reaching the horses' bellies as they waded through. On the far side, Zach finally let them stop, dismounting to check the horses' hooves and give them a chance to drink. Willow slid down from the saddle, her legs shaking with exhaustion and relief and the aftermath of fear. "We will make camp a few miles from here," Zach said, keeping his voice low even though they were alone in the wilderness. "There is a spot I know, sheltered and hidden. We can risk a small fire, get some food in you. When did you last eat?" Willow had to think about it. "Yesterday morning," she said finally. "Maybe, I cannot remember." Zach muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. "Right. Well, we will fix that. Come on just a little farther." The campsite he led her to was perfect. A small clearing surrounded by rocky outcroppings that blocked the view from the trail and would reflect the heat of a fire back toward them. Zach worked quickly and efficiently, unsaddling the horses and hobbling them so they could graze, gathering deadwood and building a small fire ring. Within minutes, he had a flame going, and the smell of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in a pan filled the air. Willow sat on a fallen log and watched him work, marveling at how easily he moved through these tasks, how comfortable he seemed in this wild place. "You have done this before," she said. Zach glanced up from the pan, a slight smile on his face. "Spent most of my life on cattle drives and trail runs," he said. "My family has a ranch down in Texas, but I have been working as a hired hand for the past few years, learning different operations, seeing different country. Was up in Kansas delivering a herd when I decided to stop through Fort Smith on my way home." He flipped the bacon, then added, "Glad I did, considering." "So am I," Willow said softly. She accepted the plate he handed her, loaded with bacon and hardtack biscuits he had softened in the bacon grease, and ate ravenously, not caring about manners or propriety. She was alive, she was free, and she was hungry. They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them, the night sounds of the forest rising around them. When the food was gone and Zach had cleaned the pan with sand and water from his canteen, he settled back against his saddle and looked at Willow across the flames. "You should try to sleep," he said. "We have a long ride ahead of us tomorrow, and you look like you have not rested properly in a while." It was true. Willow could not remember the last time she had slept without fear, without listening for Marcus's footsteps outside her window or his voice calling for her. But even here, in this hidden campsite with Zach watching over her, she felt anxiety clawing at her chest. "What if he follows us?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her all evening. "What if he finds us?" Zach's expression was serious but not unkind. "Then I will deal with him," he said simply. I meant what I said back in that stable, Willow. You are under my protection now, and I do not take that lightly. But why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why would you risk so much for someone you do not even know? If Marcus catches up with us, if he brings the law or his men, you could be hurt or worse. So why are you doing this? Zach was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost hesitant. When I was 15, he said, my older sister married a man my parents thought was a good match. He had land, money, prospects. What he also had was a mean streak a mile wide and a belief that his wife was his property to do with as he pleased. It took 3 years before she finally got the courage to leave him to come back home, and by then, he trailed off, his jaw tight. By then, the damage was done. Physical, emotional. She survived, but she was never the same. And I swore that if I ever saw a woman in that kind of situation again, if I ever had the chance to help, I would take it. So that is why. Because maybe if someone had helped Sarah sooner, she would not have lost those 3 years. She would not have the scars she still carries. Willow felt tears prick at her eyes. I am sorry, she whispered. I am sorry that happened to your sister. So am I. Zach looked up, meeting her gaze across the fire. But maybe some good can come from it. Maybe I can make sure it does not happen to you. The emotion in his voice, the sincerity, struck something deep in Willow's chest. She had known this man for only a few hours, but already she felt safer with him than she had felt in months. Maybe that was foolish. Maybe she was trading one danger for another. But looking at Zach in the firelight, seeing the determination and kindness in his eyes, she did not think so. Thank you, she said again, and this time the words felt inadequate for everything she wanted to express. Zach seemed to understand anyway. He pulled a blanket from his pack and tossed it to her. Get some sleep, he said. I will keep watch. You need to sleep too. I will, later. For now, rest. You are safe here. Willow curled up in the blanket near the fire, her body aching from the day's events, her mind still racing with everything that had happened. But gradually, the warmth of the fire and the exhaustion dragging at her bones won out over her anxiety. Her eyes drifted closed, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without nightmares. She woke before dawn to find Zach kicking dirt over the fire embers, the horses already saddled and ready. He looked tired, she noticed, lines of exhaustion around his eyes, and she felt a pang of guilt that he had stayed up watching over her all night. Did you sleep at all? She asked as she folded the blanket and handed it back to him. Enough, he said, which she suspected was a lie. We should move out. I want to put as many miles as possible between us and Fort Smith before Marcus realizes which way we went. They rode hard that day, pushing south and then west, following trails that seemed to exist more in Zach's memory than in any physical reality. He led them through forests and across streams, always choosing the paths that would be hardest to track, always watching their back trail with wary eyes. They stopped only briefly to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch of jerky and dried apples from Zach's seemingly bottomless supply of trail rations. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, they finally slowed their pace. Willow was sore in muscles she had forgotten she had, her legs aching from the long hours in the saddle, but she did not complain. Every mile they traveled was another mile away from Marcus, another step toward freedom. There is a town about 2 hours ahead, Zach said as they let the horses walk, giving them a chance to rest. Place called Cedar Springs. It is small, but they have a boarding house where you can get a proper bed and a hot meal. We can risk staying there one night before we push on toward Texas. The thought of a real bed, of walls and a door that locked sounded like heaven, but Willow hesitated. Is it safe? What if someone recognizes me? What if Marcus sent word ahead? Cedar Springs is off the main routes, Zach assured her. And you look different enough in those clothes that I doubt anyone would connect you to a description of a woman in a blue dress. But we will be careful. We will get a room, get some rest, and be gone before first light. Does that sound all right? Willow nodded, trusting his judgment. He had not steered her wrong yet. Cedar Springs turned out to be exactly as Zach had described. Small, quiet, and seemingly populated by people who minded their own business. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman with kind eyes who asked no questions when Zach paid for 2 rooms and requested baths and hot meals sent up. The bath was a luxury Willow had not dared to hope for. She sank into the steaming water in the small room Mrs. Patterson had provided, feeling the tension and grime of the past 2 days soaking away. She washed her hair twice, scrubbing until her scalp tingled, then dressed in the clean spare shirt Zach had lent her and sat by the window, combing out her wet hair and watching the quiet street below. A knock at the door made her jump, but it was only Mrs. Patterson with a tray of food: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie. Willow ate until she thought she might burst, savoring every bite, and then, with her stomach full and her body clean, she crawled into the bed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the sound of voices in the hallway, loud and aggressive, and her heart immediately began to race. She sat up in bed, straining to hear, and felt her blood turn to ice when she recognized Marcus's voice. "I am telling you, she came through here." Blonde woman, early 20s, probably with a dark-haired man. "Have you seen them or not, Mrs.?" Patterson's response was too quiet for Willow to hear, but she did not wait to find out what the widow said. She scrambled out of bed, pulling on her boots with shaking hands, her mind racing. How had Marcus found them? How had he known they came this way? The door opened and Willow spun around, but it was Zach, his expression grim. "Get your things," he said quietly. "We need to go, now." "How did he find us?" Willow whispered as she grabbed her few belongings and followed Zach toward the window. "Does not matter now. What matters is getting you out of here before he finds this room." Zach opened the window and looked down. They were on the 2nd floor, but there was a porch roof below and a hitching post beyond that. "Can you climb down?" Willow looked at the drop and swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good. I will go first, then catch you. Come on." Zach swung himself out the window with practiced ease, dropping to the porch roof and then sliding down to land lightly on the ground. Willow followed, her heart pounding, her hands slipping on the window frame. The roof came up to meet her faster than she expected, and she heard the shingles creak under her weight, but then Zach was there below, his arms outstretched. "Jump," he called softly. "I have got you." Willow jumped, and true to his word, Zach caught her, his arms strong and steady. He set her on her feet quickly, then grabbed her hand. "The horses are at the stable out back. We move fast and quiet. Understand?" She nodded, and they ran. The stable was dark and quiet, their horses right where they had left them. Zach saddled them with quick, efficient movements, and within minutes they were mounted and moving, slipping out of Cedar Springs through the back alleys and away into the night. They did not slow down until they were miles from town, until the lights of Cedar Springs had faded completely behind them, and there was nothing but darkness and the sound of hoofbeats on the trail. Only then did Zach finally rein in, letting the horses catch their breath. "How did he find us?" Willow asked again, her voice shaking with anger and fear and exhaustion. "We were so careful." Zach's expression was hard in the moonlight. He must have ridden hard, pushed his horse to catch up, and he is asking questions everywhere, showing money around probably. Someone along the trail must have seen us and talked. He turned to look at her, and his voice softened. "Are you all right?" Willow wanted to say yes. She wanted to be strong and brave and unshakable, but the truth was she was terrified. Terrified that Marcus would catch them, that he would drag her back to Fort Smith, that this brief taste of freedom would be snatched away. "I do not know," she admitted. "I thought we were safe. I thought we had gotten away." "We will get away," Zach said firmly. "I promise you, Willow. We will get you somewhere he cannot reach you. We just need to keep moving, keep staying ahead of him. The border into Indian Territory is not far. Once we cross that, we will be in the jurisdiction of the federal marshals out of Fort Smith, and Marcus will have to think twice about following too closely." They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses absolutely needed rest. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they had put another 20 miles between themselves and Cedar Springs. Zach led them to a small canyon where a creek ran clear and cold, and they made a hasty camp in the shelter of the rocks. "Get some sleep," Zach said as he unsaddled the horses. "I will keep watch." "You need sleep too," Willow protested, but she could see the exhaustion written in every line of his body. "Zach, you cannot keep doing this. You are going to collapse." "I will sleep when we are safe," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Willow made a decision. "No, we will take turns. I will watch for a few hours, then wake you. That way we both get some rest." Zach looked like he wanted to argue, but another yawn caught him and he nodded reluctantly. "A few hours," he agreed. "Then you wake me." He was asleep within minutes, his back against his saddle, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Willow sat with the rifle Zach had given her across her knees and watched the trail, her ears straining for any sound of pursuit. But the morning remained quiet except for the birds calling in the trees and the gurgle of the creek over stones. As she sat there in the growing warmth of the day, watching Zach sleep, Willow found herself thinking about how much her life had changed in just 2 days. 48 hours ago, she had been trapped in Fort Smith, engaged to a monster, with no hope of escape. Now she was sitting in a canyon somewhere in Arkansas, dressed in men's clothes, with a rifle in her hands and a cowboy who had risked everything to help her sleeping a few feet away. And the strangest part was that despite the danger, despite the fear and uncertainty, she felt more alive than she had in years. She felt like herself again, or maybe like a new version of herself, someone stronger and braver than the girl who had let Marcus Dalton convince her she was worthless. When 3 hours had passed, Willow gently shook Zach awake. He came alert instantly, his hand going to his gun before he saw her and relaxed. "Everything quiet?" he asked. "Nothing but birds and squirrels. Your turn to sleep. I will wake you if anything changes." But Willow found she was not tired anymore. The brief rest and the morning sun had revived her, and she found herself restless. She wandered down to the creek to refill the canteens, then sat on a flat rock and let the water run over her fingers, cool and soothing. "You should be sleeping." She turned to find Zach standing behind her, his hair mussed from sleep, his eyes clearer than they had been. "I am not tired," she said. "And before you argue, yes, I know I should be, but I cannot seem to settle." Zach sat down beside her on the rock, keeping a respectful distance between them. "Adrenaline," he said. "You have been running on it for days. It takes a while to come down from that." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the water flow past. Then Willow said, "Tell me about your ranch, the one in Texas. What is it like?" Zach's expression softened, and she could see the love he had for his home in his eyes. "It is beautiful," he said simply. "Rolling hills, good grass, a river that runs year-round. My parents built it from nothing, just a small cabin and a few head of cattle, and grew it into something substantial. My brother Jesse runs it with them now. They have about 300 head, some good breeding stock. It is hard work, but honest work. The kind that makes you tired at the end of the day, but satisfied too, you know. Willow did know. Or at least, she thought she did. It sounds wonderful, she said wistfully. I cannot imagine what it must be like to have a place like that, somewhere you really belong. Did you not feel like you belonged in Fort Smith? Zach asked gently. Willow shook her head. My father is a banker there, respectable, well off. But after my mother married him, all she cared about was maintaining appearances, making sure we were seen with the right people, attended the right functions. I always felt like I was playing a part, pretending to be someone I was not. And then Marcus came along and my parents thought he was perfect and she trailed off, unable to finish. And you tried to make them happy, Zach finished for her, tried to be what they wanted you to be. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper, until I could not do it anymore. Until the price was too high. Zach was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my sister Sarah, after she came home, she said something I never forgot. She said that the hardest part was not the bruises or the broken bones. It was losing herself, forgetting who she was before him. But she also said that once she got away, once she was safe, she got to decide who she wanted to be. She got to build herself back up into someone stronger, someone who would never let anyone hurt her that way again. Willow looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to pray. Is that what I am doing? She asked. Building myself into someone new, maybe, Zach said. Or maybe you are just becoming who you always were underneath all the expectations and fear. Either way, I think you are a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for. The words settled into Willow's chest, warm and unexpected. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe that she could be strong, that she could survive this and come out the other side whole. They stayed by the creek for another hour, talking quietly about small things, easy things. Zach told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk, about cattle drives under stars that stretched from horizon to horizon. Willow told him about her childhood before her mother became obsessed with society, about summers spent exploring the woods around Fort Smith, about the books she had read in secret when she was supposed to be learning needlework and hosting duties. It felt strange, this growing friendship between them, forged in crisis and danger. But it also felt right somehow, as if the universe had put Zach Jameson in that stable at exactly the right moment for exactly the right reason. They broke camp at midday and rode west, crossing into Indian territory as the sun reached its zenith. The land here was different, wilder, with fewer signs of settlement. Zach explained that this was Choctaw land, and they needed to be respectful, to move through without causing trouble or drawing attention. They saw few people over the next 2 days of travel. A family of Choctaw farmers in a field who waved as they passed. A group of hunters who eyed them warily but said nothing. A traveling preacher on a mule who blessed them and went on his way. And always, Zach kept watching their back trail, kept listening for sounds of pursuit, but Marcus did not appear. Either he had lost their trail when they left Cedar Springs, or he had decided the risk of following them into Indian territory was too great. Either way, Willow began to feel the tension in her shoulders ease, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had actually gotten away. On the 3rd day after leaving Cedar Springs, they crossed the Red River into Texas. Willow sat on her horse on the far bank and looked back at the muddy water, at Arkansas and Indian territory behind them, and felt something shift inside her. She had done it. She had escaped. Whatever happened now, she was free of Marcus Dalton and Fort Smith. Welcome to Texas, Zach said, his smile wide and genuine. The ranch is about 2 days' ride from here. We will be home before you know it. Home. The word sent a shiver through Willow. She did not have a home anymore, not really. But the way Zach said it, with such warmth and confidence, made her hope that maybe she could find one. They made good time through Texas, the land opening up into rolling prairies dotted with wildflowers and stands of oak and mesquite. The sky seemed bigger here somehow, endless and blue, and Willow found herself breathing easier, her chest no longer tight with constant fear. Zach was different here too. He relaxed in the saddle, his easy confidence returning, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the land they crossed. He showed her a canyon where he had once tracked a lost calf, a spring where he had learned to swim, a hill where he and Jesse used to race their horses. As they rode, Willow found herself watching him when he was not looking, noticing things she had been too scared or exhausted to see before. The way he sat a horse like he was born to it, moving with the animal rather than against it. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The way he was always aware of their surroundings but never seemed anxious or on edge. He was comfortable in his own skin in a way Willow had never experienced, and she found herself envying that confidence even as she was drawn to it. On the evening of the 5th day since leaving Fort Smith, they crested a rise, and Zach reined in, pointing down into the valley below. "There," he said, and Willow heard the pride in his voice. "The Jameson Ranch." Willow looked where he pointed and felt her breath catch. The ranch sprawled across the valley floor, a collection of buildings centered around a large 2-story house painted white with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. There were barns and corrals, a bunkhouse, and what looked like a stable larger than the one where Zach had found her hiding. Cattle grazed in the fields, and she could see horses in one of the paddocks, their coats gleaming in the late afternoon sun. It was beautiful. It was perfect, and it was about to become her refuge. They rode down into the valley as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Dogs began barking as they approached, and Willow saw people emerging from the house and barn, shading their eyes against the sun to see who was coming. A woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, and Willow saw Zach's face light up. "Ma," he called, waving, the woman who could only be Mrs. Jameson hurried down the porch steps, and by the time they had reached the hitching post in front of the house, she was there, pulling Zach down from his horse and into a fierce hug. "Zachary Jameson, you are 3 days late. I was starting to worry something had happened." "Sorry, Ma, got delayed." Zach returned the hug, then stepped back and gestured to Willow, who was still sitting on the mare, suddenly shy. "I brought a guest. This is Willow Garrett. Willow, this is my mother, Caroline Jameson." Caroline looked up at Willow with intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing, taking in the men's clothes, the exhaustion in Willow's face, the way she held herself like she was ready to run at any moment. Whatever Caroline saw, her expression softened into immediate welcome. "Well, come down from there, child. Any friend of Zach's is welcome here. You look like you have been riding hard." Willow dismounted, her legs shaking after the long day in the saddle. "Thank you, Mrs. Jameson. I am sorry to impose on you like this. Zach has been very kind, and I do not want to be a burden." "Nonsense." Caroline took Willow's hands in hers, and Willow had to fight back tears at the simple kindness of the gesture. "You are no burden. Come inside, let me get some food in you and show you to a room where you can rest properly." More people were approaching now. A man who looked like an older version of Zach, tall and rangy with gray threading through his dark hair, and a younger man, probably in his early 20s, with Zach's eyes and his mother's smile. "Pa, Jesse," Zach said, shaking hands with both men. "This is Willow Garrett. She is going to be staying with us for a while." Willow saw the questions in their eyes, but neither man voiced them. Instead, Zach's father, who introduced himself as Robert Jameson, just nodded and said, "Welcome to our home, Miss Garrett. Make yourself comfortable." Jesse took the horses to be unsaddled and fed, and Caroline ushered Willow into the house, keeping up a steady stream of gentle chatter that required no responses. The interior of the ranch house was as welcoming as the exterior, with worn but comfortable furniture, colorful rugs on the wooden floors, and the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. "Sarah," Caroline called up the stairs. "Come down here, honey. We have a guest." A woman appeared at the top of the stairs, and Willow immediately knew this must be Zach's sister. She had the same dark hair and gray eyes, though hers held a wariness that Willow recognized all too well. Sarah came down slowly, studying Willow with an intensity that might have been uncomfortable if Willow had not understood the reason behind it. "Sarah, this is Willow Garrett. She will be staying with us." "Willow, this is my daughter, Sarah." Sarah's eyes flickered to Zach, who had followed them into the house, and some silent communication passed between them. Then Sarah stepped forward and held out her hand. "Welcome," she said simply. "I will show you to the guest room. You look like you could use some rest." The guest room was upstairs, a small but bright space with a real bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was the most beautiful thing Willow had seen in her life. "There is a bathing room down the hall," Sarah said. "I will bring you some clothes that should fit. You and I are about the same size, and then you should come down for dinner. Ma will not take no for an answer." "Thank you," Willow said. "Everyone is being so kind, I do not know what to say." Sarah smiled, and it transformed her face. "You do not have to say anything. Zach told me a little about your situation when he came to get me. Just so you know, you are safe here. We look after our own, and if Zach says you are under his protection, that means you are under all of our protection. Understand?" The lump in Willow's throat made it hard to speak, but she managed to nod. True to her word, Sarah returned with an armful of dresses, simple but pretty, and directed Willow to the bathing room. The bath was hot and wonderful, and Willow soaked until the water began to cool, washing away the dust and fear of the past week. The dress Sarah had brought fit surprisingly well, a soft blue cotton that brought out the color of Willow's eyes. And for the first time since leaving Fort Smith, Willow looked in the mirror and recognized herself. Dinner was a boisterous affair. The whole family gathered around a large table laden with roast beef, potatoes, vegetables from Caroline's garden, and fresh bread. They talked and laughed, sharing stories of the ranch and asking Zach about his travels. No one asked Willow any prying questions, though she could feel their curiosity. Instead, they simply included her in the conversation, making her feel welcome and safe. After dinner, Zach asked if she would take a walk with him, and they stepped out onto the porch into the cool evening air. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered like diamonds across the darkening sky. "I wanted to thank you again," Willow said as they walked toward one of the corrals. "Your family is wonderful. I have never felt so welcomed." "They like you," Zach said. "I can tell. Ma already has that look in her eye, the one that says she is adopting you into the family whether you like it or not." Willow laughed, the sound surprising her. She could not remember the last time she had laughed like that, free and easy. "I would not mind that at all," she admitted. They reached the corral fence and leaned against it, watching the horses moving in the twilight. Zach was quiet for a moment, then said, "I should tell you. I sent a telegram to the marshal in Fort Smith from the last town we passed through. Told him about Marcus, about what he did to you. I did not give our location, but I wanted it on record just in case." Willow felt a chill run through her. What if Marcus finds out? What if he comes here? "Then we will deal with it," Zach said firmly, "but I do not think he will." He would have to explain why he is chasing a woman across territory lines, and with a formal complaint filed against him, that puts him in a difficult position. My guess is he will cut his losses and move on to find some other woman to torment. The thought of Marcus hurting someone else made Willow feel sick, but she also knew Zach was probably right. Men like Marcus did not learn. They just found new victims. What happens now? She asked quietly. I cannot stay here forever, imposing on your family's hospitality. But I have nowhere else to go. My parents will not take me back, not after running away. And I have no money, no skills beyond needlework and hosting tea parties. I do not know how to support myself. Zach turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the fading light. First of all, you are not imposing. My family means it when they say you are welcome here. Second, you will figure out the rest. Maybe you stay here, help Ma with the house and the garden. Maybe you decide to move to one of the towns nearby, find work there, maybe something else entirely. But you do not have to decide right now. You have been through hell, Willow. Give yourself time to heal, time to figure out who you want to be now that you are free. His words echoed what he had said by the creek days ago, about his sister rebuilding herself after escaping her abusive husband. Is Sarah all right now? Willow asked. I mean, is she happy? Zach smiled. She is getting there. It took time and some days are harder than others, but she lives in town now, runs a dress shop that is quite successful. She has friends, a life of her own. And she does not let fear control her anymore. That is what matters. They stood there as the stars came out in full, talking quietly about everything and nothing. And Willow found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life like that. A life where she was not defined by her fear or her past, where she got to decide who she was and what she wanted. The days that followed fell into an easy rhythm. Willow helped Caroline with the household work, learning to cook and preserve food, to tend the vegetable garden, to do the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch running. She found she had a knack for baking, and soon she was producing loaves of bread and pies that made the whole family groan with pleasure. In the afternoons, when the work was done, Zach would often find her, and they would go riding together. He taught her better horsemanship, showed her the boundaries of the ranch, took her to his favorite spots. They talked constantly, sharing stories and dreams and fears, and Willow felt the friendship between them deepening into something more. She tried not to think about it too much. Tried not to notice the way her heart sped up when Zach walked into a room, or the way his smile seemed to light up her whole day. She was still healing, still learning to be herself again. Romance was the last thing she needed, but her heart, it seemed, had other ideas. One evening, about 3 weeks after arriving at the ranch, Willow was in the kitchen helping Caroline prepare dinner when Sarah arrived for her weekly visit. The two women had become friends quickly, bonding over shared experiences and understanding. Sarah took one look at Willow, who was probably blushing as she kneaded bread dough, and tried not to glance out the window where Zach was working with a horse in the corral, and a knowing smile crossed her face. You are in love with my brother, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Willow's hands stilled in the dough. I do not know what you mean. Yes, you do. Sarah came to stand beside her, picking up a towel to help. And before you try to deny it or convince yourself it is too soon or you are not ready, let me tell you something. Love does not follow a schedule. It does not wait until you are healed or whole or perfect. It just happens, and sometimes it happens at the most unexpected times with the most unexpected people. Caroline, who had been pretending not to listen, made a noise that might have been agreement. Besides, Sarah continued, Zach is in love with you too. Anyone with eyes can see it. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. The way he always makes sure you are comfortable and happy. That is not just friendship, Willow. That is a man who has lost his heart." Willow's throat felt tight. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "What if I am not ready? What if I bring all my damage and fear into something new and ruin it? What if Marcus comes back? What if Zach deserves someone better, someone who is not broken?" Sarah set down her towel and took Willow's hands in hers, not caring about the flour and dough. "Listen to me. You are not broken. Damaged, yes. Hurt, absolutely, but not broken. And as for Zach deserving someone better, I think that is for him to decide. My brother is a good man, Willow. One of the best, and he would never hurt you the way Marcus did. Never." "I know that," Willow whispered. "I do, but I am still scared." "Being scared is okay," Caroline said gently, joining the conversation openly now. "That just means you are being smart and careful. But do not let fear keep you from something that could be wonderful. Life is too short for that." That night, Willow lay in bed and thought about what Sarah and Caroline had said. Was she in love with Zach? When she really examined her feelings, stripped away the fear and doubt, what was underneath? The answer came swiftly and surely. Yes, she was in love with him. Somewhere between the stable in Fort Smith and this ranch in Texas, between running for her life and learning to live again, she had fallen completely and utterly in love with Zachary Jameson. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The opportunity came 2 days later. Zach asked if she wanted to ride out to check on a herd in the north pasture, and Willow agreed. They rode out in the early morning, the air still cool and fresh, the sun painting everything gold. The cattle were grazing peacefully, and Zach nodded with satisfaction. "They look good," he said. "Should make good weight before fall." They dismounted by a stream to let the horses drink, and Willow gathered her courage. "Zach, can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said, turning to face her. "Why did you really bring me here? I mean, I know you said it was about your sister and wanting to help, but you could have left me in Cedar Springs or any of the towns we passed through. You could have given me money and sent me on my way. Instead, you brought me home to your family. Why?" Zach was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Then he said, "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." He took a breath, then stepped closer. "Because somewhere between that stable and here, I fell in love with you. I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still healing from everything Marcus put you through. I know you probably are not ready for this, but you asked, and I am not going to lie to you. I brought you here because I could not imagine letting you go, because every moment I spend with you makes me want more moments. Because when I look at the future, I see you in it." Willow's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "You love me." The words came out as barely a whisper. "Yes." Zach reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Willow Garrett, and I will wait as long as you need me to wait. I will be your friend, your protector, whatever you need. But I wanted you to know the truth." Willow reached up and covered his hands with hers. "What if I said I did not want you to wait? What if I said that I am scared, but I am also falling in love with you, and I do not want fear to control my life anymore?" Hope blazed in Zach's eyes. "Then I would say you are the bravest woman I have ever met, and I would ask if I could kiss you." "Yes," Willow breathed. "Please, yes." Zach lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but Willow rose to meet him. Their lips met softly at first, tentative and questioning, and then with growing confidence and passion. Willow felt her entire body come alive with sensation, with emotion, with the overwhelming rightness of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said again. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret giving me your heart." "I love you too," Willow said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. "I love you, Zachary Jameson." They sat by the stream for hours, talking and kissing and making plans. Zach wanted to marry her, he said, but only when she was ready. He wanted to build a life with her, right here on the ranch, in a house they would build together. He wanted children someday if she wanted them, and horses and cattle and a future as bright as the Texas sun. And Willow, who had thought her future was nothing but darkness and pain, found herself believing in all of it. They were married 3 months later, in October when the heat of summer had broken, and the air was crisp and perfect. The wedding took place at the ranch, with Sarah standing up as Willow's maid of honor and Jesse as Zach's best man. Caroline cried through the entire ceremony, and Robert's eyes were suspiciously bright as he watched his son marry the woman who had brought such light into his life. Willow wore a dress Sarah had made especially for her, white lace and silk that made her feel like a princess. And when Zach looked at her, when he took her hands and spoke his vows in a voice thick with emotion, she knew she had found her home. The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, with long days and uncertain weather and 100 things that could go wrong. There were droughts and floods, cattle diseases and market crashes. And sometimes, in the dark of night, Willow would wake with nightmares of Marcus finding her, of being dragged back to Fort Smith. But Zach was always there to hold her, to remind her she was safe, that she was loved. And gradually, the nightmares came less frequently until they stopped altogether. They built their house 2 years after their marriage, a smaller version of the main ranch house, set on a hill overlooking the valley. It had a wide porch where they would sit in the evenings and watch the sun set, and a big kitchen where Willow continued to perfect her baking. It had 3 bedrooms, because Zach said hopefully that they would need the space. He was right. Their first child, a son they named Samuel, was born in the spring of 1876, 3 years after that fateful day in Fort Smith. He had Zach's dark hair and Willow's blue eyes, and he was the joy of both their lives. 2 years later came a daughter, Emma, who had Willow's blonde hair and Zach's gray eyes and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Willow flourished as a mother, as a wife, as a woman in her own right. She learned to rope and brand cattle, to shoot a rifle, to doctor sick animals. She learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, that the girl who had hidden in a stable in Fort Smith had become a woman who could stand tall and face anything life threw at her. Sarah married a kind man named Thomas who ran the general store in town, and they had 3 children who were constant companions to Samuel and Emma. Caroline and Robert grew older gracefully, eventually turning over most of the ranch operations to Zach and Jesse, who ran it as partners. And through it all, through the hard times and the good times, the laughter and the tears, Zach and Willow loved each other with a depth and constancy that never wavered. They had found each other in the darkest moment of Willow's life, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. 10 years after their wedding, Willow stood on the porch of their house, watching Zach play with Samuel and Emma in the yard below. The children were shrieking with laughter as Zach chased them, and the sound filled Willow's heart with joy so profound it almost hurt. Zach looked up and caught her watching. He jogged over to the porch, his face flushed with exertion and happiness, and pulled her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Just how lucky I am," Willow said, leaning into his embrace. "How different my life would have been if you had not been in that stable that day." "I was thinking the same thing," Zach admitted. "Every day I thank God that I decided to stop in Fort Smith, that I was in the right place at the right time." "You saved my life," Willow said, "not for the first time." "No," Zach corrected gently, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "You saved your own life when you decided to run. I just helped you along the way. Everything you have become, everything you have accomplished, that is all you, Willow. I am just honored to be along for the ride." Willow kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude and happiness into that kiss. When they broke apart, Samuel and Emma were making exaggerated gagging noises below, and both parents laughed. "Come on, you two," Zach called to the children. "Let us go see if your grandmother has any of those cookies she was baking earlier." As they walked together toward the main house, Zach's arm around Willow's waist, and each of them holding a child's hand, Willow looked around at the ranch, at the life they had built, and felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. She thought about Marcus sometimes, though not with fear anymore. She had heard through Sarah, who still had connections in Fort Smith, that Marcus had indeed moved on, marrying some other poor woman and presumably making her life miserable. Willow hoped the woman would find the strength to leave, but she knew that some people never did. She had been lucky. Lucky that Zach had been there. Lucky that she had found the courage to run. Lucky that love had found her when she needed it most. The years continued to pass, bringing more joys and sorrows as all lives do. Caroline passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 73, and Robert followed her just 6 months later, unwilling to live without his beloved wife. Jesse married a fiery redhead named Catherine, who gave him 4 sons and taught them all to be as wild as the land they lived on. Samuel grew into a fine young man, strong and capable, with his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. He married a neighboring rancher's daughter and built his own house on the far side of the ranch property. Emma became a teacher, opening a school in town where she taught children of all backgrounds to read and write and think for themselves. And Zach and Willow grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces marking the passage of time with lines earned from laughter and sun and hard work. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect and the knowledge that they had built something lasting. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Zach took Willow back to the stream where he had first told her he loved her. They rode out just as they had that day decades ago, though their movements were slower now, their bodies bearing the marks of age. But their hearts were just as young as they had been. They sat by the water, holding hands, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "Do you remember what I said to you here?" Zach asked, his voice still strong despite the years. "You said you loved me," Willow replied, squeezing his hand. "You said you wanted to build a life with me." "I did, and we have." Zach turned to face her, his gray eyes still as clear and honest as they had been when he was 25. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willow Jameson. Every day with you has been a gift." Willow felt tears prick at her eyes. "And you saved me. Not just that day in Fort Smith, but every day since. You showed me what love really is, what it means to be cherished and respected. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." They sat there until the stars came out, talking and reminiscing and simply being together. And when they finally rode back to the ranch, to the house they had built, and the family they had raised, Willow knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. 5 more years passed, bringing new grandchildren and new challenges and new joys. Zach and Willow became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family that included children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch prospered under Jesse and Samuel's management, growing to include more land and more cattle than Robert and Caroline had ever dreamed possible. And through it all, Zach and Willow remained each other's constant companions, best friends and lovers, partners in every sense of the word. They had faced darkness together and come through to the light. They had built a legacy not just of land and cattle, but of love and family, and the knowledge that even in the hardest times, hope could prevail. When Zach passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by his family, Willow held his hand and whispered that she loved him one last time. And though her heart broke at the loss, she also felt grateful for every moment they had shared, for the life they had built together. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see Samuel's eldest son take over management of the ranch, long enough to see Emma's school expand to serve 3 towns, long enough to know that everything she and Zach had built would continue on through the generations. On a warm spring evening, Willow sat on the porch of the house she and Zach had built, watching the sun set over the valley one last time. She thought about that terrified girl hiding in a stable in Fort Smith, never dreaming that salvation would come in the form of a dark-haired cowboy with kind eyes. She thought about Zach standing between her and Marcus, 3 simple words changing the course of her entire life. "She's with me." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and pink, Willow closed her eyes and felt Zach's presence as surely as if he were sitting beside her. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and family and purpose. She had been broken once, but she had healed. She had been afraid once, but she had found courage. She had been lost once, but she had found home. "I am coming, my love," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "Wait for me." And with a smile on her face and peace in her heart, Willow Jameson took her last breath, knowing that her story, the story that had begun with terror and violence, had ended with love and family, and a legacy that would continue for generations to come. The ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the family gathered on the porch of the main house, they would tell the story of Zachary and Willow, of how a cowboy had saved a woman hiding from a violent man, of how he had stood between her and danger and claimed her as his own. They would tell of the love that had grown from that desperate moment, of the life that had been built from ashes, of the family that had sprung from a single act of courage and compassion. And in this way, though Zach and Willow were gone, they lived on in the hearts and memories of all who came after, a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to create something beautiful from even the darkest beginnings. Their story became legend, passed down through the years, inspiring others to be brave, to be kind, to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. The house they built stood for over a century, weathering storms and droughts and the passage of time, a monument to the love that had created it. And on the porch railing, carved deep into the wood by Zach's own hand on their first anniversary, were the words that had started it all. "She's with me." 3 simple words that had changed everything, that had been the beginning of a love story for the ages. And so the tale of Zachary Jameson and Willow Garrett lived on, a reminder that even in the wildest places, even in the hardest times, love could flourish. That a single moment of courage could change the course of a life. That standing between someone and their demons could be the first step toward building something extraordinary. Their love story had begun in a dusty stable in Fort Smith, Arkansas, in 1873. It had grown and deepened across the prairies and rivers of Indian Territory and into the rolling hills of Texas. It had weathered storms and struggles, had been tested and proven true time and time again. And it had ended not with sadness, but with the knowledge that 2 souls who had found each other against all odds had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for. To live with purpose, to love without reservation, to make a difference in the world even if it was just in the life of one other person. Zach and Willow had done all that and more. They had created a family, built a home, and showed everyone around them what real love looked like. And on quiet Texas nights, when the wind blew through the valley and the stars shone bright overhead, some said you could still feel their presence in the land they had loved, in the house they had built, in the legacy they had left behind. Two souls bound together by fate and choice, by courage and compassion, by a love that had transcended time and circumstance to become something eternal. Their story was over, but its impact would never end. It would live on in every act of kindness, in every moment of courage, in every person who chose love over fear. And that, perhaps, was the greatest legacy of all.